in Illinois on Agenda 21 and other issues, especially concerning DuPage County. To give you a little background on myself, and I'll use this as a lead-in to what I want to speak about tonight. I was probably like most of you were some years ago, kind of thinking and believing that my Republican Party was still the party of Ronald Reagan, who was the first presidential candidate I voted for. So for years, when it came to voting for county officials, obviously I'd see the Republican name, vote on the ballot, you're Republican, I'm voting for you. I thought, well, our county was in pretty darn good shape, because look at this, we have all Republicans in the county board, and I was pretty comfortable with that. About 8 years ago, the world changed, and I got involved with the county, and I found out that it wasn't quite what I had thought it was. And I'm going to use this as an introduction, talk a little bit about the county, and part of what I'm going to talk about is a little bit on the rain tax. I was asked initially here to speak about the rain tax, and I said, well, the rain tax only takes so long to talk about, but the other big thing I think we need to talk about when we're talking about county and what's going on here is Agenda 21. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with that or have heard of it. We tend to have more Tea Party people that have heard about it than the general public. I'd like you to look at, I tried to get enough of these out. This is an outline for tonight. You should have it on your table. There's 2 pages. The front one says Agenda 21, and the back one says a history of the West. The reason I have these 2 topics here, and I won't start on them right away, I have a few other things to say. One, I want to cover Agenda 21 and try to let you know what it is and how it's affecting you right here in your own backyard. And the second page, the history of the West, about 1.5 years ago, I came to the conclusion that whatever we're fighting, we only seem to be fighting the brush fires. We're not getting down to the root cause of the problem. And I wanted to find out what in the world happened to our country in the last 30 years to bring it to the point we're at. So I did a 6-month study. And in that 6-month study, I came to a conclusion that our country got to where it was at because of specific circumstances and reasons. And I also came to a conclusion that there is a specific answer that we're not addressing and we haven't really gotten down to yet. So if I can get through Agenda 21 with you, I'm going to try to get in, if time permits, to that second page and let you know what I found out and try to get that across to you. Now I'd like to start just with a few quotes here. We all know who Karl Marx is, right? Yeah. Now, Karl Marx, I'm going to read you several quotes from him. For the bureaucrat, the world is a mere object to be manipulated by him. The next one is, the first requisite for happiness of the people is the abolition of religion. The meaning of peace is the absence of opposition to socialism. Here's another one. How about this? My object in life is to dethrone God and destroy capitalism. The bureaucracy is a circle from which no one can escape. Its hierarchy is a hierarchy of knowledge. Now I'm going to go to Joseph Stalin, another wonderful communist here. America is like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold. It's patriotism, its morality, and its spiritual life. If we can undermine these 3 areas, America will collapse from within. Look at what's happening today. I'm going to get to this in a while. This gentleman by the name of Harvey Rubin is the vice chairman of a non-government organization called ICLEI, International Conference for Local Environmental Initiatives. It was a non-government organization set up to help push Agenda 21 into local governments, and it was set up prior to the passage of, or the formulation of Agenda 21. He says individual rights will have to take a backseat to the collective. That gives you a very, very good overview of where Agenda 21 is headed. Maurice Strong, who was the Secretary General of the Earth Conference, the Earth Summit in 1992, where Agenda 21 came from, here's a quote from him. It's the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? Now, I'm just giving you these quotes. I want to give you a flavor so you have this kind of in your mind and your perspective of these people that are involved here and how they're thinking and where we're heading. James Paul Warburg, his father was active, there's a banking family, and his father was active in setting up the councils on foreign relations and also at the beginning of the Federal Reserve. So the son came before the Senate in 1950, and this is what he told our Senate. We shall have world government whether or not we like it. The only question is whether world government will be achieved by conquest or consent. Okay. Let me get in now. That gives you a little bit of something to think on while I get into DuPage County. Here's my background. I got called by my church. Now, my pastor called me about 8 years ago and said, we have a problem with the county. Can you please do something, look into it? I said, well, it shouldn't be a problem. My background was real estate, development, construction, and I said, yeah, he kind of explained the problem a little bit. Now, I'm not going to say no because I'm married to his daughter, so I didn't have a lot of choice. So I said, no problem, my background's in real estate, it should be easy enough. I said, I just call a county, meet a worker out there and see what the problem is, we'll have it solved, then it'll be no problem. So I made a call, I looked into it, and made an appointment to meet a county rep out at our church property. The problem, as explained to me by the pastor, and this is what it turned out to be, was we had plans of sometime out in the future we're going to build a youth center on the church property. We had quite a bit of acreage. And somebody had donated some fill dirt to go onto a hillside to make the hill a little bit bigger, which we probably would need to build a building. Although we didn't have any permits, we weren't going for construction at the time, they just dumped the dirt. Well, somehow some of the dirt got lifted up and put back into the back corner of the property. That back corner of the property had been mowed lawn. We had bought the property, it was just grass. The pastor liked deer, and we had lots of deer on the property, and he let the grass grow up so the deer could bed down in the back corner of the lot, which was about an acre. So some of the dirt got pushed in there, and the dirt was already moved out by the time I got there. So I met the representative from the county there, and just to put it in perspective, when you say somebody isn't right, they just aren't right, that was my very first impression of this individual. There's something wrong here, big time. The dirt was all gone, everything was fine. I was told, well, you know, you have a wetlands here. I'm looking, well, there's never been a wetlands. Well, it is now, we're calling it a wetlands, and you put that fill in, and you're gonna have to remediate this thing. What does remediate mean? It means you're gonna spend tens of thousands of dollars. You're gonna spend years with us in court. You're gonna hire engineers, you're gonna get all this work done, and you're gonna remediate this wetland. You're gonna put it back the way it was never, because it wasn't a wetland to start with. So we went ahead and I started getting involved. This girl did not like some of the answers I gave. So about a week later, we get another nasty letter from the county saying, oh, you're in violation on your well on the property. The well cap is cracked. Now, it wasn't one of these letters saying, we're just notifying you. It was nasty. You don't get this fixed, we're taking it to court. We're gonna, they're gonna get it. So I knew what happened, obviously. This county employee went to another county department and said, we want to lean on this church. And this began a cycle. I went through a number of things as I got more involved. I got beyond just our church problem, and I started fighting the county on issues. And when I hit the wrong nerve, they would show up at the church and start slapping violations on the property. The last violation, the last time they showed up at the property was 3 years ago. We had just gotten a new county board chair, which was Dan Cronin. And I said, well, it's a good time for me to bring in some information on county corruption, because I had lots of, because I dealt with these guys. They were totally, absolutely corrupt county. So I took 3 or 4 board meetings, county board meetings, which are every other week, and I took 3 minutes of public comment at each meeting, and what did I do? I set a foundation for corruption, how I'm going to present this corruption case to them. So when I put the final piece of the foundation in, I said, now, next time I'm coming and I'm going to bring the evidence and we're going to talk about corruption right here on your webcast. And I'll put it right out in front of you. Well, normally it took the county a week after I said something they didn't like to send somebody out to my church to look for violations. Well, this time they showed up the next morning. And they went after, they were door knocking, they were all over the property, door knocking, telling the pastor's kids they had to get them tools, and they were going to check this. Our septic was all bad. You're in violation. Well, our septic was gone because they made us tear that out and put in a sewer line and water from the city, and they knew it was all done. They were calling, harassing the pastor at his office, and this was kind of my background with the county. This is how things progressed, how they got started. That's how I got involved with it. But I also found that there was more going on than just my problem, my church. I found there was another church that had a phony wetlands claim against them. Matter of fact, right down the street from another Tea Party I attend, which is at the Wheaton Bowl in Wheaton. This church was 3-4 doors down. They had lost half of their property and had their bank accounts cleaned out by the same stormwater division that was cleaning out my church. And I can't get into too much detail. I'd like to, but if I do, I'll miss the jump to 21 here, which is the main topic I want to talk about. But what happened was, as I got more involved, I began seeing there's more and more things going on. I got a connection with a mayors and managers conference guy that was overseeing the mayors and managers issues at the county. He would go in and watch all the meetings. So one day after a stormwater meeting, I get a phone call, or I get we're running into this guy, and he says to me, listen, you better go out and look at the development meeting at 9 o'clock today, because there's some housing thing, and I think it's trouble. Okay, well, I went in, I never been to a development meeting, I was doing stormwater. Well, I get in there, they got something called workforce housing going on. What's workforce housing? Being a development background, I looked at it. First meeting I'm in, I figured out what it was. They're going to change every single family neighborhood in the county to multifamily subsidized. Meaning, you got a house in a $500,000 neighborhood on an acre, they're ripping it down, putting up 20 to 30 units on that property. You think they're building a mansion next year, but then you find out that there's 20 subsidized families living there. They came this close to getting that through. I went out and raised opposition to it, we got it knocked out. They didn't like that. But this was the kind of stuff I found going on at the county. Let's deal with the rain tax, okay? They want to tax your rain. Does that sound like a good idea?
No.
How did we come up with a rain tax? Well, after I dealt with the stormwater division for a while, after about 6 months, but I said, thank God that there's no way they can get to most of you people in the county. They can get to you if you got wetlands or if you're along a stream or river. So, thank goodness, most people in this county are safe from these wackos. Well, guess what? I pick up my newspaper, read, hey, they want to tax and control every raindrop that falls from the sky on every property. I'm looking saying, now they have found a way to get to every single piece of property in the county. They're not looking at where the water is running off to, they're looking at where it's falling. So every square inch of the county is now going to be in direct control of the stormwater division. So how does this rain tax work? I wanted to talk about this just a little bit. The stormwater division gets tax money, a certain amount allotted through the county tax system, and they run on that. They have big plans. They want to basically put green infrastructure all over the county, on your property, on public property, all over the place. They need money for it. So they come up with a rain tax. The first rain tax they came up with was called the Phase 1 fees. It came out of Europe, and they tried to bring it into the county. And the Phase 1 fees was going to measure every square inch of non-permeable ground you had on your property, which would be under your roof, your driveway, your deck, your sidewalks, your garage, whatever. And then they would send you a monthly bill saying that so much water is running off your property from that non-permeable, and you owe us because we're maintaining the streams and rivers. I raised opposition to that, and I got it knocked out. The second time they tried to put it through was in the 97th General Assembly. Under the bill was put in. It was called HB 1372 by Mike Fortner, who's now my state rep, and he's a green lefty. He put this bill in. I found out about it, but it had already gone through the House. It passed. It was in the Senate. So I went out, I was running for county board at the time, and every door I knocked, I told people, you gotta call in and do something about this. You better raise your voice up, you're gonna be taxed. Well, we raised up enough voices that the thing was killed in the Senate. Matter of fact, they were so scared, Fortner gutted his own bill and filled it in with something else. So we avoided the rain tax. But that wasn't enough for Mike Fortner. 98th General Assembly comes around. I like to check up on old Mike Fortner because I don't trust him. So I get on my computer, I go and look at the bills he's sponsoring, and oh my gosh, another rain tax bill. Okay? I get in there, I look, it's the same thing again. It's already passed the House and back in the Senate. So back I am to work. I'm calling Tea Parties, I'm calling, we got to get opposition. Well, we got good opposition. We got every senator, state senator from the county to vote against it. The only problem was we had a county board chair by the name of Dan Cronin, 18 and a half years in Springfield and well-connected, who wanted it through. So he goes down there, spends some political capital, and has all the senators from outside the county voted in. And what happened was this was a two-part bill. One part had to deal with Peoria County and one part with DuPage. And what the bill stated was you're going to get this rain tax in Peoria County, but only if the voters voted in by referendum. The same bill says DuPage County gets it if the county board votes it, and it doesn't go to the voters. And I called down to Springfield, I talked to the Senate sponsor of the bill, who was the Peoria senator, and he said, oh, I'd love to see you guys get the vote, but I've already made a deal with Fortner and I can't. So he's a Democrat, he's a big-time liberal Democrat, says I think you guys should have the vote, but I can't do anything. Fortner did it, you know. So obviously the thing goes through. I tried to call Cronin on it. I said this is not a good thing. He wouldn't back off of it. He didn't want to talk to me. And let me explain to you kind of how the bill works. Is you've got it. This was going to be a countywide, and the idea was we're going to give you a little deduction on your monthly rain tax bill if you'll put green infrastructure on your property. The problem is once the green infrastructure is on your property, which is a rain garden, a bioswale, a roof garden, brick pavers for driveways, these are all considered part of that. The county now owns a hunk of your property because you now have stormwater facility on your property.
Oh my God.
These guys are so clever, they wanted to have a county government footprint on every single property. Now, Downers Grove has passed this and put it in. I think, is anybody here from Downers Grove? How do you like your rain tax down there, huh? Okay, they get it in. Now here's the thing. Our county was pushing for all the cities to have it as well as have the county. They wanted you to have 2 rain taxes. This came out of the county government. Here's the problem. You say, hey, Downers Grove, you lousy city council guys that voted this thing in, we're going to get rid of you. Vote them out, vote the mayor out, get rid of them all. You can't get rid of the rain tax, because let me tell you how clever these guys are. As soon as they establish that tax, they issue bonds against it to start buying green infrastructure and putting it in, so that money is tied up against the bonds for payments. And this is part of the plan of how it works. So you can't fire the rain tax guys. And this is exactly how they work. So these guys are very clever. We are fighting the rain tax now in DuPage County. It has passed, this second bill has passed the state. The county board has the right to put the tax on you. We had a protest against it last August. The only reaction I got was one of the board members came up to me and said that in private Cronin had told them that he's not willing to fall on the sword over the rain tax. So hopefully there's enough fear in these guys they won't try to put it through, but we got to watch them because they desperately want the money. There's a lot of money involved here. So that's the rain tax. Downers Grove has it, and to tell you what the costs are, they are going to give you a deduction if you put that green infrastructure on your property. So if you pay $50 a month, you could get it down to as much as $25. So you could get it in half, right? But to get that $25 savings, you got to spend $1,000 for an engineering study, $1,800 for a topographical survey, and $300 non-refundable to apply for it. If you don't get it, you're out all that money. If you do get it, you just spent $3,000 to get your deduction, but you don't get it until you spend another $10 or $12 to put the infrastructure in. So for $15,000, you can save $25 a month for 5 years. Okay? That's how these guys, it's unbelievable. That's how these guys think. Now, this rain tax is part of something bigger. It's part of something called Agenda 21. And that's the main topic for tonight. Our county, I found out, is very heavily, deeply involved through their Economic Development Department in Agenda 21 and Agenda 21 program. Economic development is mainly based on transportation, building department, and stormwater. And those are main linchpins for Agenda 21. So we've got this county full of Agenda 21. Now, I hadn't heard of Agenda 21 when I started this. Matter of fact, when I got the workforce housing knocked out, we couldn't figure out where it came from. A friend of mine was helping me deal with it. And for a year and a half, we couldn't figure out where in the world did they connect in with this workforce housing. Then one day I get a call from my friend. He says, I got the smoking gun. I said, what is it? Workforce housing comes from United Nations, Agenda 21. I said, I never heard of it. He said, oh, you're not supposed to. He gave me a website, go and read this. So I went to the website. Oh my gosh, workforce housing people are supposed to go around. Here's workforce housing, it's the best development in another state or county. You know, they use different names all over for the same thing. And the idea is that you're not going to know, you know, that you're not going to be able to compare notes with anybody to say this is all from the same source. And they're told, don't tell anybody when the workforce housing people come into the city or county, don't tell anybody you're from the UN. No, this is just a nice green sustainability deal. So he told me about this, I started studying it, and that was my first dose of Agenda 21. 2 weeks later, Glenn Beck, I don't know if you used to watch a show on Fox, he was ready to go off the air, one of his last shows he did on Agenda 21. So I found out about 2-3 weeks ahead of that. It was the first I ever heard of Agenda 21. Now, it's very interesting. I went in and I started studying it because the more things I'm dealing with at the county, the more Agenda 21 I'm running into as I look at Agenda 21. The question is, one, how do you identify it and how do you stop it? And where did it come from? And how did all this stuff start? So as I started studying it, I found that I had to go back and do a study on the United Nations. Now, I don't know how many of you have looked into the United Nations or are really, real familiar with its history. So I'm going to give you a little bit of it, and this is going to kind of help you. Agenda 21 is not an easy thing to understand. I mean, it's, like I tell people, you could take a college semester course to really cover it. It's a very large area with there's a lot of things involved. It's not just a little program. And there's a lot to understand about it. But what I want to try to do is boil it down to the essence for you tonight and let you know just how close to your backyard it is and in your towns and cities. And I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the history of the United Nations very briefly. During World War II, Stalin, Roosevelt, Churchill, they meet at conferences like Yalta, the Crimea where the Russians have now moved in, and the Ukraine. They had a conference there, they had other conferences. And they just decided when the war ended, and they knew they were going to win it, that we're going to have some kind of organization. So they decided on a name, the United Allies. Okay? Well, the United Allies was never used, but the organization did come about. And in April 25th, 1945, in San Francisco, 52 nations met to form the UN Charter. And now I'm going to throw a name at you. I don't know if everybody's heard this name. Alger Hiss? Yeah. Okay. Who chaired the meeting? Alger Hiss. And I'm going to give you some names here because you're going to see the real communist flavor in the United Nations here. So Alger Hiss chaired it on October 4th, 45. The United Nations Charter was signed, and we officially had the UN. Matter of fact, when the Germans surrendered in World War II, they surrendered to the United Nations, not the Allies. Okay? Now, December of 1945, the U.S. House and Senate unanimously vote a request that the United Nations make their headquarters in the U.S. The UN building was constructed in New York on land purchased for the UN by John D. Rockefeller Jr. at the price of $8.5 million, which was a huge fortune back then. So the Rockefellers are involved from the beginning. In April of 1946, do you remember the League of Nations was formed by Woodrow Wilson? What happened to that? In April of 46, they folded the League of Nations agenda into the United Nations, and it went away. No more League of Nations. So that's where that went. Now I'm going to bring you way up forward date-wise. I just wanted to give you the kind of beginnings of the UN. I want to bring you to an Agenda 21 where I want to get to a timeline here. 1971, there was a convention called Ramsar. Ramsar was the name of a city in Iran where this convention was held, and it was a convention on wetlands. And they had decided that birds migrate and they use wetlands, and the birds have no idea what a border is on a country. So they said, well, if one country's filling in wetlands and another one isn't, eventually the birds won't migrate, so they identified a bunch of wetlands across the different countries that were critical, and they had a conference to set those aside. This is important because when we're talking about sustainability, which is the main thing Agenda 21 is built around, and a climate crisis, which is the crisis they're building it on, it came out of Ramsar. This is where it started. In 1972, they had the first conference on the environment in Stockholm. It was hosted by a Swedish Prime Minister by the name of Olof Palme. She was a member of the Socialist International. And also Marie Strong, the Secretary General of the conference, was there. They came out with something called the Stockholm Declaration. It was concerning the new international economic order. And here's what they wanted to do. They wanted to regulate multinational corporations. They wanted authority in the UN to nationalize foreign property. They wanted authority to establish commodity monopolies, and they wanted to transfer technological assistance between countries. It was, a communist type thing. We want to level the playing field for everybody. We want to use this order to do it. Now, in 1974, UNEP was set up. That was the United Nations Environmental Group, and there were two main non-governmental organizations involved with that. One was the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and the other one was, you've all heard of the World Wildlife Fund. In '76, they had a conference on human settlement called Habitat 1. These are all conferences, they're all building up towards Agenda 21. What they decided that they needed to do was they wanted to bypass the laws that your countries and your states and your cities have and put in, have a way for the UN laws to be put on you without any representation. So this conference was all about putting United Nations laws into your country, into your city, and going around your elected officials. And what they decided to do, and what came out of this conference were these recommendations. One, they want to redistribute population in accordance with resources. Two, government must control the use of land to achieve equitable distribution of resources. Three, control land use through zoning and land use planning. Four, excessive profits from land use must be recaptured by government. Five, public ownership of land should be used to exercise urban and rural land reforms. And finally, ownership rights should be separate from development rights. And we're going to see that, and I'm going to get into that a little more in Agenda 21. We're still in the history here. 1980, they came out with a book called World Conservation Strategy. 82, we adopt the World Charter on Nature. The UN adopts that. I can't get into that, take a little too much time, but in 83, the Brundtland Commission was convened by the UN. Gro Harlem Brundtland, the former Prime Minister of Norway and a Vice President of the Socialist International, which is the cover group for socialists, Marxists, and communists. That's all it is. That was her position. So she chaired this commission. There was 21 countries represented. William Ruckelshaus, our first EPA head, was there to represent the U.S. And what they did, this is very important, because what they did was they passed a resolution to appoint a commission to propose strategies to achieve sustainable development. I don't know how many of you have heard the word sustainable development, but that's a very cornerstone of Agenda 21. The definition they were using for sustainable development came out of, guess what? The Russian Constitution from 1977. And that was, the world has too many people using too many resources, and the UN is the best global body to monitor, mandate, and preserve the resources of the planet. Again, more communism. You see communist people, communist ideas coming in. to the background of Agenda 21. In '87, Brutman wrote the book, Our Common Future. This outlines what sustainable development would be. In 1990, I remember I said ICLEI was formed in 1990, International Conference for Local Environmental Initiatives, and it was going to bring Agenda 21 into your cities and your county. 91, Soviet Union falls. 92, here we go, Agenda 21 is here. 1992, Rio Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. Maurice Strong, a Canadian oil billionaire, chairs it for the UN. They put together Agenda 21 there. I'm going to get into that a little bit more, but George Bush, Bush 41, signs us on as our president onto Agenda 21 there. The same year, Nancy Pelosi submits HCON Resolution 353 to implement Agenda 21 in the U.S. The bill passed the House but failed in the Senate. But Nancy Pelosi wasn't satisfied with that. In '93, the next year, she submits HJ Res 166 to implement Agenda 21. Again, that bill stalled in subcommittee. Same year, President Clinton signs Executive Order 12852, creating the President's Council on Sustainable Development to launch Agenda 21 into the federal agencies of the United States government. 1994, the Senate tried to ratify the soft law treaty. Bush signed it, but it doesn't become a hard law treaty unless the Senate ratifies it. But what happens to Agenda 21 is, at the last minute, a man by the name of Dr. Kaufman shows up at the Senate. He's got this big map called the Wildlands Project. And he says, here's what happens under Agenda 21. You see this map, 50% of all U.S. goes off limits to any human habitation. It means no mining, no farming, no living, no nothing. 75% of the U.S. goes off limits to almost every single person except for an elite few. And he said, if you sign on, this is what you're going to get. Well, the Senate said, oh my gosh, we didn't know this, and they did not ratify Agenda 21. That's why we don't have it as a hard law treaty here. We get to 2003, our Chicago area right here, they open up the Climate Exchange, founded by a Dr. Richard Sandor, who was a university professor at the University of Chicago. The Climate Exchange was funded by the Joyce Foundation. The Joyce Foundation was, at that time, headed by the brother of Bill Ayers. And so they put up the money. Sandor became one of the people that had ownership. The problem with the Climate Exchange is we never ratified the Kyoto Treaty, so they couldn't force you to buy carbon credits. And in 2010, the Climate Exchange ends. Richard Sandor receives $90 million for his 16%. Tells you what a scam that was. And you know, we had Obama and Gore were involved in it on the board, so they shut that thing down. 2004 World Summit for Sustainable Development is held in Johannesburg. It came up with a list of international sustainable development laws. These laws were going to govern the implementation of legal rights of sustainable development. Basically, it was a social transfer of wealth from the first world, us, to the second and third world. And I'm going to end this short history with this. 2009, Barack Obama creates a partnership between HUD, Department of Transportation, and EPA to promote sustainable communities and regional planning grants. In other words, he's going to send people out through the EPA and HUD and Department of Transportation out to your neighborhoods, your counties, your cities with bags of money to tell them, if you implement these sustainability projects, you're going to get money. So this is how they decided they're going to put this in. Now, that's a history. I want to actually get into Agenda 21 here. And this is where we get onto your little agenda. This is the one you have. Agenda 21, we have to realize, to boil it down to what it is. It's the United Nations coming in and setting up a one world government. A one world government that's going to be a communist socialist style government. That is the idea. And that is the essence of what it is. One of the problems in America is we're a republic, we have votes, we have rights, we have a constitution. This stands in the way of the implementation of Agenda 21. It's got to go.
So, obviously, when they set this thing up, they set up this outfit called ICLEI, which I talked about, was the International Conference for Local Environmental Initiatives in 1990. ICLEI already, they started, as soon as Agenda 21 went through in 92, they started pushing it in to your governments, your cities and towns. You all have it. You don't know it, but it's there probably. You know, you probably don't know, but it is definitely there. It's in our county. ICLEI basically it's called an NGO. It's not a part of the government. It's a private company, organization. So ICLEI is formed in 92, then we come up with Agenda 21 and Maurice Strong. Now here's the thing. Anybody here heard of Gaianism or the Gaian religion?
Yes.
Okay, we have some, okay. Gaia was the Greek goddess of the earth, okay? And the Gaians believe that the earth has a spirit, that it is a living thing, rock and all, that there's this earth spirit. So what happens is that the Earth Conference opens up. Maurice Strong, who's an oil billionaire and a Marxist, chairs the Earth Summit. When you come into the Earth Summit in Rio in 92, there's a huge depiction of Gaia, the Earth Goddess. And outside of the conference is Maurice Strong's wife, who's a Gaian. She's sitting with 300 wisdom keepers around a sacred fire that is kept going through the entire conference. And during this whole time, the wisdom keepers are beating drums 24/7. There is a spiritual component to Agenda 21 which comes in under the green side of it. So Agenda 21 is communism, and Agenda 21 is a spiritualism built on earth worship, or what the green, you say these green earth people believe in. So you have two things that seem very odd. Communism, which everybody thinks is anti-religion, but it's really religion itself. And then you've got spiritism. And this is what the whole thing was built around. So what happens? The Earth Summit, they come out with this thing. The next year in 93, they put out a book on Agenda 21, and it's issued and it's ready to go. They had to have something to make people give in to the Agenda 21 philosophy, right? And they knew they had to have a crisis. Back after Ramsar, they thought we're going to have climate change for the crisis, but they decided that far back that nobody's going to get excited over climate change. So what ended up coming out of the 92 conference in Rio was we're going to have global warming crisis. Okay, and this is where it came from. Now I want to talk about that for a minute because